Now it's November 30th, 2022. I'm listening to the 12 o'clock news in New York. They're alerting me in places that I don't have access to that Pelosi stepped down. I didn't know what that was going to mean, didn't know who was going to replace her. They're saying on artificially intelligent with some human driver of, I don't know who they are. Um, that there's this Hakeem Jeffries from New York. He's a Democrat in New York. Never met him, never spoke to him, know nothing about him. But yet he's stepping up and they're going down to Washington. They're replacing in some younger generation, the older generation. I'm seeing what's replacing the older generation. I'm not all right with it. After they broke my hummingbird relationship as somebody very special, almost like if Ballistic had a temperament and no patience, that's who I was supposed to marry. And instead, for some reason, that relationship was broken and a crazy donkey arrived. Now, 40 something years into this crazy donkey relationship, even though I'm the center sun in the solar system that brings order to chaos, which is a religious whatever, and I don't have the word for the religion. They follow it. People, no idea what kind of people. Um, so there's that. Then I also noticed that in breaking the bank and following some of these fraudulent schemes that the humans are up to in all different types, there's some corona relief funds that some form of justice is seeking some of the hidden problems in New York City for collecting these funds. They're buried deep within like NYPD and a couple of other places that during the pandemic, there were some checks handed out in the city, and there were some schemesters and fraudsters who accepted the payments. And now justice is being served, and however that portion works, and whatever. But really frightened about what is starting to pile up and arrive in Washington. And now all of a sudden, like the Nancy Pelosi's of yesteryear are no longer the family representatives, but I mean, like, we still have currency. There's some real serious things. There's sorcery, there's code, there's family and tree representative necessity. And then there's this mishmash minutia that's going on at the moment that is not all right based on the fact that they didn't even get my formal marriage and the arrival of my children correctly, but yet they're performing on world stage and in my local New York area with ties into Washington as if they've behaved correctly amongst humans after forcing all sorts of artificial issues and then human performance that's been out of alignment without direction in the correct steps and in the correct order for what I needed and for what by extension, the galaxy and the universe needed. But yet they're performing as if somebody granted them permission, and I have no idea on whose paradox they are all conducting this performance as if they're not fraudulent. I don't understand why the DOJ doesn't go after these children of I don't know whom for fraud, considering I know as source and sorcery code with a universal display of I can define and I've passed and mastered the test of time and the hands of time on polymathematics and polyscience that then are driving forces inside deep dark space where there's just a vacuum. I am pretty certain at challenges, if I challenge any of these participants, they do not have the same grounding force that I do in galaxy or universal terms. So therefore, I do not understand how they are gathering in New York and gathering strength and force and pushing themselves into Washington, and why there is not some formal process in place to deflect this amount of change in like musical chairs is what it feels like. Where is my hummingbird with that really sultry temper and tempo? I'm just curious. This is what it looks like. This is now what they're announcing in artificial intelligence, for which I have no idea who gave them the authority or the permission. I don't. This is the station.
Democrats are ushering in a new generation of leaders, electing Congressman Hakeem Jeffries to be the
first black something or other. That's wonderful. My son came of age. In fact, I have 2 sons that came of age that were available for this Democratic position or this U.S. House of Representatives position. To my knowledge, neither of my children were asked. Why is that? We have definition.
American to head a major political party in Congress. Representative Jeffries is now the leader of the House Democrats, succeeding Nancy Pelosi, who recently announced she is stepping down from her leadership role. The 52-year-old Jeffries was raised in Brooklyn and lives there now. Eyewitness News reporter Derek Waller with more.
Anything that takes a technology signal, that uses a clock, some form of electrical impulse, needs to run off of some sorcery code. There are defining parameters within sorcery code. They are owned. They have something to do. They have to be based in reality and fact. That would be calcaneous and calculus, just as a idealistic science principle. So, with that being said, knowing that New York runs off of electrical impulse somewhere in the system, and knowing that it needs clear definition, for which I bring, still confused as flower to hummingbird, what prevented that very real relationship from ever coming to fruition in a what looked like naturalized process, so I could be absorbed into his family's ballistic temper of some sort, or however that goes.
Democrats arrived at the Capitol this morning ready to make history.
It signals that the future is bright. We've always talked about for a long time about a generational shift. Our caucus is younger, so to have younger-ish leaders.
Who gave them permission to do a generational shift? Just curious. I've been kept out of that conversation. Nobody's asked my permission. Nobody's spoken to me about it. Yet they're gathering in New York. I'm on the island just outside of the Isle of Manhattan. There's water surrounding me. So I'm just curious, on what authority and permission are they gathering like this and promoting themselves as if there were no gods about us and as if nobody knew in like aerospace and defense of humanity.
Is important.
The 52-year-old Brooklynite is 30 years younger than the woman he's replacing, Nancy Pelosi, who is stepping down, allowing a new generation to lead. Along with Jeffries at the helm, Catherine Clark of Massachusetts and Pete Aguilar of California are running unopposed to be second and third in command. During his decade in the House, the New York City native has found a way to unite liberal and moderate Democrats. He's a champion of charter schools and pro-Israel, but he's also pushed for police reforms and legalizing marijuana. Here he is on CNN talking about the midterms where Republicans won the House, but with a much smaller majority than polls predicted.
The future is encouraging, is bright, coming out of these midterm elections where extremism was rejected, election denialism was rejected, and we're looking forward to a moment of continuing to be able to make progress for everyday Americans.
Is that them driving themselves with some fundamentals in music and movie careers and some artistic talent that is just stardust in actuality? Because in real aerospace and defense terms, if you take a blank canvas of a vacuum of time and space, and you have to actually put in that equation a set of human circumstance in order to set a formula and then to build off that theoretical in a practicality, I don't understand how they entered the system. I don't.
All across the country.
Mayor Eric Adams says he's ready to work with Jeffries on a New York-focused agenda.
We're going to be traveling to Washington, and we were sitting down speaking with him and the other delegation as well. We still got to, we still have asylum and migrant issue. We still, New York sends billions of dollars.
He still has a migrant issue. Now, I'm just curious because, again, he's Mayor Eric Adams, and I'm respectful of all of the delegates. But there is a flea circus that seems to be going on. And it is not, I feel it's not being handled properly. Again, if the father with the high heels knew just how the flea circus was performing and could figure out that very geospatial, configurement, I mean, this should never have been performed in this direction or with these particular circumstances, equaling out and summating out to this. There seems to be a break in some, I'm not quite sure, part of this world stage and at the warehouse.
Dollars to Washington, D.C. That, oftentimes we don't get in return.
And not only is Brooklyn in the House, Brooklyn's in the Senate, too, with Chuck Schumer retaining his role as Senate Majority Leader. In Park Slope, I'm Derek Waller, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
A scare at a luxury hotel in Midtown resulted in a suspect.
Now, interestingly enough, I heard on one of the TV producer land mentions, on Yellowstone, for the governor of Montana in that theory, talking about New York and California in theory. And whatever goes on at Subway and Underground as an overcast, because there's some real serious subterranean issues going on in some ongoing endeavor that, in my issue, just never seems to rectify. I don't know quite why. But with that subtext, I mean, there also was a theoretical that in the Addams family, there's a Wednesday Addams. Again, Wed, W-E-D, and Thur, T-H-U-R-S, having horseshoes on the same escalator, and then a wed happening thereafter. Right, yeah, he arrived 2005. Again, they sent me a representative from the exact same escalator that I'm on the day the baby arrived. So I know, in practicality, that there are people in the fashionista and policing department that know about this ongoing issue. I just don't know where I'm needed to sit quietly or to stand up and gather whatever I need to help them and my son at Sorcery Code with CALCANIOUS on the field, and knowing that there is a grand calculus somewhere that is being misscripted, and I'm not quite sure where the grand architect is and where my hummingbird is to flower relation, because something went wrong. And I know people know something went wrong. I just don't know why so much time has dilated almost as if somebody thinks that they're studying some grandiose schematic. Meanwhile, it's just some, again, being covert about it. It just seems like someone is using that in order to do some sly work with sleight of hand. So at the beginning of this program, they talk about this COVID and this fraud that the buzzing bees in New York that are actually working discovered, and some form of justice is being handed out to people that I've never met, didn't know, but I know there are people on the case. So here we are.
Suspect charged with trespassing. Police.
Take a date?
Why not? Just because I'm homeless and unemployed.
Inch of rain. You can see we've already got.
MTA, NYPD, and other agencies are being charged with wire fraud for defrauding the Federal Paycheck Protection Program, or better known as PPP. The prosecutors say they stole millions of dollars from the federal government set aside for those in need. Criminal complaints named 13 defendants, but sources from say there are about a half dozen more. Those workers belonging to numerous agencies, including the Department of Education and Administration for Children's Services.
The weather might be.
The DOE, the Department of Education, look at that. And NYC and NYS. I don't know what a PPP is. Linda has mentioned it before when she was still working at wherever she was working, that she actually had a participating paycheck. It rolled out, then she knows about it. She's able to clearly define it. I had no idea until she spoke on it quietly, just at the dinner table type of a thing. But apparently there's some fraud involved in it. Also, yesterday they mentioned on the news there was this in New Jersey. They are having a U.S. postal system where they're stealing checks in the mail. I am pretty sure that is code for something else. Like the checks in the mail? Right, yeah, sure it is. When? But they have up, and I'm like, that is one of the hardest, like postal police. I know they exist. I'm just not quite sure how they function with the public, because they would know if there was interference in-house. The public is really like, if they weren't expecting a check or didn't know that a check was supposed to be sent to them, if someone's stealing that particular check, that is a lot of pressure and burden on the actual police themselves to do the right thing. Just saying, the way it logically works out from the street, looking at what protection is in place for the public and what's being announced as artificial intelligence with a human driver of some sort, who I don't know who that is. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.